in addition to the constituency returning officer, has 2 deputy returning officers. So there will be sharing of workload amongst the 3 officers to enable the returning officer to quickly dash and bring over the result.
So before you come to Bomas, please have your result. Put your results together. We encourage candidates, please put your results together. Come, you can do the simple maths. You'll obviously know what you have got in the election. When you come to Bomas, come with your results so that we compare notes here.
Again, because the law gives us 7 days, we are not really worried about the time. We will have all the time to receive all the documents so that we process the results accurately and declare them.
All right. Those, the commissioners of IEBC, including Wafula Chebukati, the chairperson, and they were speaking at the simulation of the election technology. That was on the 9th of June. They're required in law that 60 days to the election, at least 60 days to the election, they must have done that so that they are able to see what challenges exist and how they can be corrected. And Veronica, you were there.
Yes.
First of all, what was your experience? Because I remember before I left at the time, they had transmitted about 40% of the forms from the polling stations. What did you make of the event?
First of all, when the event started, there was a bit of a hitch. The screens went off, and that was completely very concerning to us because on a day of simulation is actually just coming to run what you intend to run at a later date. It's not real in the sense that you are testing the system. And the system that was being tested was a results transmission system that would run on the 9th of August. So it was, we expected it to run without a single hitch. And even when we questioned why it went off a bit, the story was maybe about if there is a bit of a power blackout, and we wondered whether that was part of the simulation, you know, the kind of a blackout that we experienced on that day. And then when they started trickling down, they intended to transmit 2,900 polling results from 2,900 polling centers.
Right.
And you know the transmission then is where the results, the form is transmitted, the results that have been counted from the polling center is transmitted to the tallying center.
Right.
And they ideally clarified that this time it's only the image that will be accepted. There will be no text.
No text, yes.
Meaning that they are supposed to either scan or photograph that image and then send it through technology, through phones, through the modem that they spoke about in places where there is no 3G, 4G network. It gets transmitted seamlessly to the tallying center. But then the speed at which this transmission was coming was not as what I would have expected. Maybe we are over-expecting performance from IEBC, but we expected 2,900 polling centers to just come in so fast. And then I don't know whether it's because technology has continually been advanced in many areas. We expected, for instance, when you are saying, there was a number we kept seeing on the screen, when 700 polling centers have transmitted, we would see this is now 700. But in terms of displaying that form, it wasn't easy. You have to go, scroll down, get into the bars, get the constituency, the county. We would want a much more user-friendly system where it is easy to just click on the button and be able to see which results have been transmitted. Because you can imagine if the transmission is happening from 44,000 polling centers, if then you have to search for a polling center within Nairobi, in Madaraka Estate, you're searching it, you will be in a big forest of 20,000 forms. So we are expecting that IEBC, the reason for this transmission is to get our feedback as political parties and all stakeholders who are using the system to help us understand what system they're using and how they are going to transmit at a pace which does not stress anybody or does not cause tension.
Okay.
And I like the bit he talks about the math, that everybody will come in with the math. I hope you do understand what he means by simple math. is a form of tallying. It's a form of collating your results. You are taking from this polling center to the next polling center, adding them up. That form of math is the one he's saying. You can actually come to Bomas with your math on how you have gotten the results. And it's supposed to be a self-checking system. Yeah. Because at the polling center, when the counting is done, the agent who is at that polling center gets that form. That form, in actual fact, I don't know why there is so much fuss about the tallying. It is those forms that we collate together as political parties, yes, and we can already tell you whether we are winning or losing. Yes.
And Senator, that speed, because they sort of explained and said that they depend on the national connectivities. Yeah. They don't have a network of their own. They depend on the telcos. In fact, Professor Gulio was saying that they are the sympathy of MNOs, the mobile network operators. Yeah. What for you would be the biggest concern as we head to this exercise that has actually led to the nullification of an election in this country?
First, let me just say, Sam, that, technology is evolving. And this year, I think during our nominations and primaries, we saw a lot of political parties also using a lot of technology. So in one way or another, I am not really in a place where I say I'm too disappointed even after this first simulation that IEBC has done, because a lot of us, our political parties, we will also be able to track, and we're also using technology to track, these results. And some of the things the improvements that IEBC has made this year is also very commendable. That this time around it is images that are being sent and not numbers. That is a very big deal. And so the 7 days that the commissioners are saying they have, I don't think they will not be able to deliver within those 7 days. I think we should just be patient and know that, it's technology, it's evolving, and the checks and balances are getting better every election. Every election we are seeing IEBC putting in some form of improvements as we go. So I guess, like they say, because it's now the mobile operators that we are all at the mercy of, that on those 7 days, then there is no significant failure. But even if there might be some form of failure, the good thing is that these images, once captured by the ROs, by the returning officers, it is an image that you can't change it, you can't alter it, you can't. I don't think we can have, such serious lapses, in my opinion. So I would say let's be a bit patient. Let's know that I think they're really trying IEBC, the checks and balances.
In 2017, one of the challenges was that there are forms that never reached the National Tallying Center, the scanned images that is, up to even when the entire election was being nullified, the presidential election was being nullified. So for you this time, I believe you sit in the Presidential Campaign Secretariat.
Yes, I do.
What are your plans like to ensure that whatever Chebukati is talking about, the parallel exercise of tallying your own results, what are the plans to make sure that happens?
I think the protection of vote and the protection of result pegs on the agents you have at the polling centers. And one, of course, of any political party's plan, not even just UD, is the right of every political party to have agents at every polling center, especially at presidential level, to make sure that the process that is being used for the voting is not questionable, it's verifiable, and it's very accountable, and that the counting is done in an accurate manner in a way that every vote is accounted for. For instance, if a polling center has 400 voters, you don't expect the result to come out with 450 votes cast, because then that would mean there is no explanation as to how the 50 extra additional votes have been cast into the ballot box. So one of the check system is the register itself. That register, to ensure that you have an accurate register. And that is why you have seen a very heavy debate on how voters have been registered, where they have been registered, transfer of any voter, any request on transfer, because the beginning of verifiability begins at the register level. Then once the agent has witnessed every single process from morning, from 6 a.m. when the polling center opens, even to the distribution of the voting material, even the previous day when the RO is giving any training or having a discussion with every single stakeholder in the election in preparation for the following day to vote. It needs to be accountable and verifiable. And now the agent, what the agent does, for instance, once the result is, the votes are counted and the result has been recorded in the presence of every single agent, then everyone will have a copy of that results.
Right.
In form, if it's from 34A. That 34A is the one that now speaks into the credibility of the whole election. And now the results transmission is how the movement of that result gets to the tallying center so that they can be collated together and we can know who the winner is.
You will have agents across the 46,000 polling stations?
Yes, we will have agents everywhere and not just one political party.
So how are they supposed to transmit them to you themselves?
For us? Oh, we have all manner of technology to ensure it's transmitted because we now have mobile phones which are able to transmit images. Even now, if you look at what happened in Juja, in Kiambaa, even by the time IBC has finished collating, our agents are already telling us the forms they are holding in their hands, and we can already tell them.
You've conducted simulations for your side?
Yes, we are in the process of preparing our agents.
And areas where you don't have 3G, 4G connectivity, what are you going to do?
I am sure we will have a way of verifying what has happened there.
Okay. Do you know what the plans are to ensure that you're able to track the results from the polling stations all the way to the national level from your side?
It's the same thing like she's saying. There will be agents in every polling station. And that's almost fairly standard in every election.
Right.
That where you have a presidential candidate, you have to ensure that every polling station you have your agents there monitoring, and then you have also your back end that is receiving and collating this information so that you can now compare with what IEBC is doing. And that's what Chebukati is speaking to, that we will be comparing. And the good thing is that now technology is there for everyone to access. And we have our agents on the ground. Again, everyone has either a smartphone, and where we don't have 3G, we will figure out what to do so that we can get all that information together. So she's right. And that is what also is happening on our end as well.
You know, I'm just wondering, IBC has a whole 4 billion shillings for Smartmatics to offer the election technology. I don't know how much the respective presidential campaigns are going to spend on that. But anyway, we'll wait to see how that happens. But Senator, are you concerned? Because last week on 9th of June, we're expected to be getting the final publication of the voters register. But there are certain concerns that were raised by the auditor, KPMG, including some 1.18 million registered voters or records of registered voters that show some are dead, some duplicate, some registered with the wrong documents, and that has to be cleaned up before really they can go ahead to publish the final register. Are you satisfied with the processes so far?
It's always very worrying around this time of election when the questions of the voter register come up. And of course, everyone has to be concerned because therein lies, our numbers are in that register. And if anything goes wrong in that register, then of course we are likely to be affected. Or you'll find that citizens may be denied the opportunity to cast their vote, which is a really serious breach of the Constitution. So IBC, when it comes to the register, I think we need to see a more proactive approach to how the cleaning is done, the handling of the register, the time period, again, that is given. I know they tried very hard to see if they can get new members. I mean, they tried a lot with the registration drives that happened, and we tried to rally a lot of our citizens to, to come in and get new registration, especially the young people. But this issue of cleaning up always raises a lot of questions. And there's a lot to panic when you hear the numbers that are going to have to be removed because these are dead voters or, somebody, or whatever cleaning up that is going on. It does worry us, of course, because those are, potential numbers if it is not done properly for that matter. But again, it's the institution, it has to do what it is doing. We give them the benefit of the doubt because there's not much you can do. You leave it to the experts to do it and hope that it will be done right and that the publishing of the final register is done in good time to allow parties also to interrogate and be sure that, our numbers are intact. Because again, because of technology, we know our numbers. We all have digital registers these days.
How do you know that?
We know our numbers. We have the registers as well.
Yeah.
Most of the political parties have gone digital.
So you're talking, the numbers based on regions or Based on
we know, like now in WIPA, we have our digital register.
Okay.
So we know our numbers. We know them. We know them because we were registering them.
Party or as
a political
the
party
registered
first.
Voters
as a political
in the
party.
regions?
First, as a political party,
Okay.
we know our numbers. Then, of course, generally, in the region, we know what our numbers are likely to be. So we want to interrogate that final register, because if there's a serious anomaly, we will be able to track it and say, no, these are not the correct numbers for our region, or according to our WIPA register, which, we have a majority of our members in the, the lower eastern region.
Right.
We know our numbers from even our register, so we'll be able to compare.
Okay.
This is the beauty of technology.
Okay.
It's the beauty of technology.
SG, just, I think a week before, Deputy President had spoken to EU ambassadors and told them that he was concerned, or the team was concerned, about over 1 million voters that are thought to have been removed from the register, but also spoken about some illegal transfers. With the report coming out, that 1.18, we will get those slides on the side shortly that show that those that have died are 246,000, duplicate records are 481,000, those that registered with IDs that are not theirs are 226,000, and then invalid documentation is 164,000. How do these numbers now reconcile with what the Deputy President was saying? Is there any progress from that conversation?
Let me first say this. It's very good that IEBC, and this is where IEBC has almost acquitted itself, has owned up to a problem. That they can already see that when parties or party leaders like Deputy President has raised an issue of 1.8 million voters not being accounted for, it's not a misplaced claim or something that is just picked in the air. It was an existing concern. It was an issue that could have spoken into that register having been interfered with, and it could render a lot of credence to the issues that we've been raising about other factors outside IEBC interfering with the process of registration of voters, custody of that register of voters, movement of voters who have been registered in certain polling centers. So I would say that IEBC has done well to come out publicly and to own up to a problem, to say that we do recognize and appreciate that what people are alleging that have been transferred from one station to another is not just hot air. It's not just something people are just blowing for no reason to do politics.
But also the Deputy President's word was that close to 1 million of our supporters have been removed from the register.
Yes, because what we have done, he did not speak from a position of not considering the data. We have had complaints from people. For instance, if you go to Nyeri County, why would anyone want to move mass voters from Nyeri County to Eldas? We have evidence of real people.
How many?
Real IDs. We will not discuss that evidence here right now until we produce it. We have evidence of real voters being moved from counties like Nyeri to Eldas, Northeastern. Counties, even Honorable Kanini Kega is on record as saying one of his children has been moved from Nyeri to another location. Why would that be happening to a credible register? I think the challenge right now for IEBC is to ensure how they surmount this challenge is in future going to show what kind of credibility Kenyans should render to IEBC. From our end, we think they have done well to raise this issue, raise this concern, and we are now watching to see how they address that concern. We are also watching to see how, when we have raised concerns about ministers interfering with the IEBC process, that these ministers are told to back off from that process. Because if we have been tussling with, UDA has been tussling with Mushero. Let me pick out on the ICT ministry and why it is so key. Because the ICT ministry is the one that is controlling the technology that government would use. So when we have questions raised on ICT ministry, they seem to be producing data. I don't know where they are reading it from. Do you then not see...
From your understanding, would the ICT ministry interfere with the voters' register?
I think, Sam, you know very well, ICT ministry deals with technology. IEBC is dealing with technology. We would be interested to see when Mucheru speaks with so much confidence that we have these numbers, and he's the one in charge of technology. Communication Authority is under him, under his ministry. And Communication Authority is the medium through which every network is regulated. There is a very heavy nexus that when he speaks then about the figures recklessly, that there is something they are doing behind the scene, and at some point they forget and come out in the public and actually own up and say, we've been up to something.
Veronica, you are the Secretary General of UDA, so when you speak, people hold you with a lot of seriousness.
Yes, yes, yes.
And on the 9th of May, 2022, I spoke to Professor Guliye, Commissioner of IBC and also the chair of the ICT committee, and he told me that they have no relationship with the ICT ministry, and they have no relationship with CS Joe Mucheru. He's just the CS of ICT.
But do you remember the committee?
Just hold on. That their data is theirs, and they cannot share it with anyone.
Yes.
So I'm struggling to understand how then does the cabinet secretary or the ICT ministry infiltrate the voters register?
And
educate me on that.
I'll even struggle more. I'll even struggle more to answer the question on how a voter who registered in Nyeri finds their data in Kisumu or in Eldas. Or a voter who registered in Nairobi finds their data in Turkana. I will struggle even harder to find that the IEBC, which is doing that registration, is almost now raising that issue and saying, we admit there are transfers that we do not understand. Would you not struggle with that? Does it not mean then those committees that purported to manage elections? You remember there was a time when the ICT ministry, the security docket, they had all converged together, even purported to bring on board the judiciary to do a committee and a planning on election management. Why would they be interested in doing exactly what IEBC was supposed to do under Article 88? And I'm happy that that committee is no longer sitting.
Okay. Still haven't answered my question. But Senator...
Because some of the questions would ideally be answered very well by the IEBC, because they understand the constitutional makeup of the teams that are working behind the scene. For instance, when they do registrations, I would assume that what Professor Guliye is saying is the correct position. That there is nobody else who is interfering with the IEBC, and that if a voter has moved and they are not able to tell how they have moved, then it means they need to close in and make sure nobody is interfering beyond.
All right, we'll be listening to the auditor from KPMG, Gerald Kasimu, on what he said about this process. But Senator, how then shall we reconcile these concerns between, because there is political questions, but then there are also facts. How do you reconcile those two so that we have a proper election?
Well, in the end, it is how IEBC conducts itself. In that, she's right. How they address the challenges that are being put forward to them is what will determine how confident we are that the process has been fair and has been transparent. And Chebukati has tried very much to answer every question that has been sent to him. In fact, every presidential candidate who has raised questions, he has addressed each and every one of those questions, which now lends to the credibility and the trust that he continues to build on IEBC. So a lot of us should also learn to just let us give the process a chance, because as long as IEBC answers all the questions that come, then fair enough. Everything is smooth so far. So we let the institution do what it must do. And also just to say, before we moved to IEBC, when ORPP was at the focus, we saw a lot of issues happening there. We had a lot of our members being shifted from, our party to other parties in a way that even the ORPP could not answer. I don't know if you remember that period.
What party?
They would go maybe to UDA. In fact, most of them were being transferred into UDA and into Musalia Mudavadi's party. We don't know. There was an anomaly just before the focus now shifted to IEBC when it was at ORPP. And we had to raise a big issue to a point where the ORPP had to close her system, so that now the process of uploading members into our political parties' lists had to be done differently, and more checks and balances were put.
But they brought back.
But let me say
no, we had to. No, it was a very big issue. We had to now, I think ORPP had to find a new method of asking citizens, deregister yourself. Here is how you check
and go back to your
that and go back to your party, if you remember that.
Okay.
And if you see the data of the number of people who deregistered themselves from other parties, it was almost to the tune of 1 million people who had been moved. So there was some, there were games that were being played even at that time.
Okay.
So now, like she says, we are looking forward to see how IBC is going to address any anomaly of members who are being moved, without their consent. But I know at that stage,
yes,
we had a challenge, and the ORPP, we put under pressure to deal with that issue at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
have a right of response on that.
Yes, you do. Let's listen first to what the auditors say. Gerald Kasimu is leading the auditing exercise of the voters register. Listen.
Some of you in the public may have witnessed complaints about processing of transfers, where there are certain voters who have raised concerns about their records being transferred from areas that they had registered into areas that they did not wish to vote from. We've identified this as a key issue of concern. We have discussed with the Commission the number of records that need to be reviewed for purposes of rectifying any anomalies, and we expect that by the time we issue our final report, we can confirm to the Commission that we're comfortable with the implementation of the recommendations that we have made.
All right, so that's the auditor, and of course there's a stakeholders meeting on 17th, that is next week on Monday, I believe. Is that so? No.
Yes, it's on 17th.
17th of June, so be sure to wait and see what happens. But there's a question, as you give your right of reply, there's a question you didn't answer me, and I was asking specifically about the claim by DP Ruto that close to 1 million voters had been removed from the register. What does that mean, and where did that information come from? Because the audit doesn't show anyone removed from the register.
You see, technically, removing you from the register would mean this. If you're registered in Nairobi today, you know as Sam, I am voting in Nairobi in Huruma. Come the voting day, you find your vote is in Mombasa. Have I removed you or not removed you? That's question number one.
That's transfer.
Whatever you call it, the fact is you have been removed from your right to vote. You have been technically knocked out. Because I have made sure I have dispositioned you from your accessible polling center, and you have slept knowing on 8th of August that tomorrow morning I'm waking up to go to Huruma, at polling center in Huruma, only to find that you're in Makueni or you are in Mombasa. So the removal, don't read that word as just, it doesn't just mean that I have placated you from the register. It means a movement that makes you makes it difficult for you to access. And if you look at most of the claims or the rights that are perceived, access is a very important right. Access to a certain right. You can create circumstances around me that I have no access to exercise my right to vote. The minute you do that, then that's a removal. You can read it as a removal.
Okay.
The next one is when I have registered. We have had actual people who've registered, even candidates who are verified even at the time of nomination. But by the time we are presenting their papers to the IEBC, the person is completely non-existent on the register. So I would say the removal, you can define it to include the two categories, that your name is non-existent completely in the register. Yes, that has happened.
Have we followed up and corrected that?
Oh, yes, we have followed it up to head office, specific with a person's ID, and called IEBC to assist and help us to understand and reinstate the person back to the position they were supposed to be at. Before that, unlawful removal happened. And tactically, those removals have been done in areas that we term as our strongholds. So that you find where we have a heavy support base, that is the area where there is a concentration of that trouble. That means it's targeted removal, it's targeted movement of the voters, it's targeted transfer of voters, registered voters, to ensure that they do not vote.
Okay.
And let me also now answer to what my sister has talked about UDA, and though it's a moot point because the registrar gave access to everybody to use their phones and to control the party that they belong to. Before political parties woke up in Kenya, UDA was the first political party that walked to people in marketplaces, in kiosks, in farms, and every other part of this nation to request people to register as voters. And our people walked with books. How do you think we got copies of ID cards? Because we did not register a single person, my sister, without a copy of their ID card. We all know, even in an M-Pesa shop today, you don't leave a copy of your ID card. So if I'm registering you, our system was running using people's copies of ID cards, an image of that ID card. How then would you say that I have picked the person wrong and you have found them in UDA, and I can demonstrate to you that the person has supplied to us a copy of their ID card, because it was the system of ORPP. Let me explain about the system of ORPP. When you are registering as a member of a political party, if you have already been registered for, say, UDA, and you want to move to ANC, the registrar of political party has rules under Section 14 of the Political Parties Act. They cannot resign you from here without a copy of the ID card. So for anyone to say we moved somebody from Wiper, we could not have been allowed access. She will never effect that transfer unless this copy of ID card is availed. Once it is availed and the person has signed the form, we had two-step way of moving the person from a member of another political party to a political party. They sign for us a form and they give us a copy of the ID. We were able to demonstrate whoever came in had those two documents together, and the registrar could not effect. So what they were grappling with,
speaking to each
no, it was maybe if somebody moved to, say, UDA today, and then tomorrow they have changed their mind, they want to move back to ANC, or they want to move back to Wiper. They'll even allege that, ona sasa wamenitoa kwa hii chama, wameniweka kwa hii chama. Yet we have a copy of their ID.
Okay, that's okay, because I also think right now the system has changed. You have to...
You can even check, yes,
actually,
and you can resign on your phone.
Yeah, the system had to be
now,
changed.
There's something you said, that's how you got the identity, copies of identity cards. You mean for the presidential endorsement?
No, that's a different process altogether.
Okay.
If you want to resign from a party, you must, now you can use the phone, it's easier, because your phone uses your ID, your registration on the eCitizen platform. It uses your eCitizen account to be able to move you. So it presupposes that you're using your ID.
All right.
But before you had to use a copy of your ID. Now, for the presidential, once again, we walked back to the people, had the booklet signed by a totally different set, because for the presidential, we did not need the person to be a member of UDA party. They just need to be registered voters in Kenya.
That's right.
For them to just give your endorsement.
I want us to transition and talk about something about gender parity in this election. Yesterday, Justice Anthony Murima gave a judgment